Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Nigeria's parliament's on lockdown after police clash with Shi'ite Muslims who stormed the building demanding the release of their leader. IMN followers say that 2 of their members were killed. They've long accused authorities of persecution. Also, a year on from the fast thaw in relations between Eritrea and Ethiopia, we take a look back at what's changed and what's holding up further progress between the neighbours. And some exciting prospects for enterprising entrepreneurs in Madagascar, hoping to make the country a rare source of African caviar. We take a closer look. But first, Nigeria's National Assembly was on lockdown and sessions suspended on Tuesday after Shiite Muslim protesters clashed with police in Abuja. Shots were fired during the unrest. IMN supporters say that at least 2 of their members were killed. Now, demonstrators from the Islamic Movement of Nigeria accuse police of having opened fire. The IMN also say authorities have been persecuting them and have been calling for the release of their leader. Sheikh Ibrahim Zakzaki's been in custody since 2015 and was held without charge until 2018. Rights groups say that security forces have killed 400 IMN protesters since then. Sam Olakoya tells us more about Tuesday's unrest.
The problem started when members of the Islamic movement went to the National Assembly to lay a complaint that their leader has been in detention for a long time and they want him released. And what they said was that in the course of this, the police started firing tear gas, started firing live bullets, and 2 people were killed in the process, and several of their members were also injured. But the police had a different version. They said the violence was the Islamic movement was responsible for the violence. So it's difficult to know who exactly was violent and who wasn't violent. But the Islamic movement actually released some photographs showing their members. I mean, one of these showed somebody who appeared to have been shot in the head, and there were bullet wounds around his body, although there's no independent confirmation of where this photograph was taken. But I mean, they showed this as evidence of the fact that the police actually attacked their members.
So what's at the heart of these protests?
At the heart of this protest is the leader of the Islamic movement, El Zakzaki, who has been in detention since 2015. Not only that, he was badly injured when he was arrested in 2015. He was shot in the eyes and in very, very poor health. And the Islamic movement had all the while carried out several protests to demand his release. There had been court orders that he should be released, but the Nigerian government till date has not released him. So this has actually angered members of the Islamic movement, and for many Nigerians, it's quite worrying if this group had, over the years, been campaigning for this. If you recall the Boko Haram situation also, it was the death of their leader that led to the kind of violence we are seeing now. And some Nigerians say if this man happens to die, then the Islamic movement will have no central person. They will have no central leader, and which means they could have factions, and these factions could become violent. So that's the situation we find ourselves now. I'm not sure for now the government is willing to release this leader, in spite of the fact that people said he's very, very ill and he could die at any time.
Well, staying with Nigeria, it has the highest number of children in the world who don't go to school. Despite the country being the continent's top economy, the UN education branch UNESCO reckons that 10 million Nigerian kids are going without an education. Most of those foregoing the chances that brings are girls. Access to education can be hampered by poverty, conservative religious beliefs, and, crucially, corruption amongst officials and institutions handling the issue. South Sudan's president marked the country's Independence Day with an apology for his government's failures. Salva Kiir also apologized to civil servants who haven't been paid for several months. There were no big celebrations for the 8th anniversary since the breakaway from Sudan. Civil war erupted in 2013. A peace deal was agreed last year, but still hasn't been implemented. And Italy has allowed a group of African migrants rescued in the Mediterranean to disembark. 47 people, most believed to be from Tunisia and sub-Saharan Africa, stepped into Sicily from an Italian patrol boat on Tuesday morning. Rome's been refusing to let non-profit rescue ships bring migrants into port. The group arrived just hours before a ceremony marking the closure of what was once the biggest migrant reception centre in Europe. Now, it's been a year since decades of tensions between Eritrea and Ethiopia were put behind the neighbours as they signed a declaration of peace and friendship at an historic summit. War broke out between them in 1998 over a border dispute. But after Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed offered an olive branch not long after taking office last year, there was a quick breakthrough and an end to the hostility. Nicolas Chemin from our Africa desk tells us more about the last 12 months in their relationship.
Initially, there was much euphoria. You had the flights that resumed between the two capitals, the border crossings that opens. You had families and friends who hadn't seen each other for 18 years who were reunited. You had Ethiopian traders who were able to sell a lot of products in Eritrea, which is a very closed economy. You had a lot of Eritreans fleeing into Ethiopia. And then in November, you had the UN Security Council that lifted the sanctions against Eritrea, which had been in place for 9 years. Eritrea was accused of supporting the Al-Shabaab Islamists in Somalia, something Eritrea had always denied. But clearly, it was the fact that they made peace with Ethiopia that meant that the UN then decided to lift the sanctions. So you had this first phase, and then gradually Eritrea started closing all the border crossings, once again without giving any official explanation. Some analysts say that maybe Eritrea was afraid that opposition members or armed groups would come into Eritrea, which is of course a one-party state.
So things seem to have slowed down in terms of the momentum of that improvement in relations. Is there any way of predicting what direction that relationship between Eritrea and Ethiopia is likely to take next?
Well, it's hard to predict, first of all, because few people had predicted the peace deal a year ago, and then because, as I've said, first you had this situation improving, and then it stalled once again. I think what the future of the relationship, it will depend very much on what happens in each state. In Eritrea, the UN says that since the peace deal has been signed, the human rights situation has not improved. The main problem in Eritrea is that you have this national service, which is poorly paid and which can last for years, and it pushes thousands of Eritreans to flee to Libya and then on to Europe. And many people thought, well, if there's a peace deal has been signed with Ethiopia, this national service, this military service will disappear, because the justification for it were the tensions with Ethiopia, but it didn't disappear. And then if you look at the Ethiopian side, it's very unstable right now. A year ago, Abiy Ahmed, the prime minister, he arrived and he really shook the system up. He released thousands of political prisoners, and freedom of speech is greater in Ethiopia today, but that means also that there's more hate speech and more conflict between the ethnic groups. Abiy Ahmed, he survived an assassination attempt last year. A month ago, the head of the army was killed. The president of the Amhara region was killed. So you see, Abiy Ahmed has a lot of internal problems to deal with. Eritrea can't be his priority right now. So some people are saying now that they hope that the powers that really facilitated the peace deal a year ago, that's the US, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, that they can really now push forwards and maintain the pressure on Eritrea and Ethiopia to make this peace really concrete.
Nicolas Chemin there for us. Well, finally, apart from vanilla production, Madagascar is preparing to diversify its culinary offerings. Some business owners are investing in trying to make the country the source of the first and only African caviar. It's an unexpected project in a country beset by grinding poverty, but the hope is that luxury foods might be able to help boost the local economy. Take a look.
It's another hectic day in the kitchen at this high-end restaurant in Antananarivo. Locally renowned chef Lalaina Ravalomanana is creating new recipes to take advantage of Madagascar's own caviar, the first to be produced in Africa.
I like mixing caviar with salmon because of its mellow, slightly fatty nature, which doesn't distort the taste of the caviar. I've added an egg on the side. Perfect. I like ingredients which are not too strong, so the caviar is not affected.
It's in this factory, 60 kilometers outside the capital, that the caviar is processed. After the cutting, weighing and rinsing, comes the all-important step of salting the caviar, a very delicate task.
You really have to respect the 60-second time limit. If not, the caviar becomes soft because of the salt we've added. If you go over a minute, you might completely ruin the eggs.
This Madagascan caviar is sold for €750 per kilo, 2 to 3 times cheaper than its French equivalent. But the producers say that this doesn't impact the quality.
You can see it's got a nice grey colour. When I smell it, I'm getting fresh butter. And when I taste it, it rolls nicely in the mouth. I think it's good caviar.
The sturgeon fish, imported in fertilised egg form from Russia, are kept in carefully monitored conditions in Lake Manansoa, perched high up at 1,400 metres above sea level.
Our lake has very, very pure water, fed only by rainwater and with no industrial or commercial activities in the surrounding area. We also produce fish food with fresh products from Madagascar, all natural, so the fish are extremely healthy.
At the moment, Madagascan caviar production represents a drop in the ocean, with only 1 tonne produced last year in a world market of 340 tonnes. But the entrepreneurs behind the project are ambitious and hope to expand 5-fold this year.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.